My name is Greg Wesner. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Panzura. I deal mostly with the products on the AEC side. My background is in architecture. I have a degree in architecture. I actually have 2 degrees. My master's was a lot more about programming computers. So I got out of school. I went to work at an architecture firm. I was a product manager, project manager, as well as a CAD manager until I got my license. Shortly after that, Autodesk recruited me and kind of shift gears from being an architect by day and writing code at night to writing code during the day and doing architecture at night because I had my license. And so, then I worked at Autodesk for like 14 years. I did everything from software development through consulting. I did a lot of consulting for large AEC firms. And eventually in 2014, I started here at Panzura. Panzura creates a global file system. And Panzura actually wasn't targeting the AEC industry when they started up. The AEC industry kind of found Panzura. Several of our larger customers found Panzura, said, hey, can you make it work with all these apps that we use? And Panzura found that there was actually a really good market there for what they did. So they started to focus on it, but they didn't really understand the AEC market, being a lot of software engineers, a lot of storage people in the storage industry. So they recruited me to come down and start working with them. And so yeah, the last, I guess it's 6 years now, I've been working with Panzura. I do a good job of kind of letting Panzura know how the AEC industry works and understanding the AEC industry and explaining to the AEC industry how our technology works, and then taking our feedback, coming back and bringing it back into features and things we develop within Panzura. So that's a little bit about me. And today we're going to be talking with ATG. They're a reseller of ours. And so I'm going to let Dan and Michael introduce themselves. But yeah, today we're going to have more of a casual conversation about Panzura, some of the experiences and things we're doing. If you guys have questions while we're going through this, just feel free to put those into chat, and we'll try and pick them up as we go. So Dan, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So my name's Danny Doyle. I'm Vice President of Sales here at ATG. So I'm responsible for the day-to-day sales here at ATG. A little bit about ATG. So we're a dedicated, Panzura partner, as Greg just mentioned. We're here at AU, and so I also want to point out we're an Autodesk Platinum partner focused on the AEC industry, and we've got a team scattered across the United States, and our sole focus is really on this AEC industry, and really focused on helping our customers achieve their business goals. And Greg, similar to you, I had a long tenure at Autodesk. I spent almost 18 years there running different teams. So it's good to be working on this side of the aisle.
Yeah. Michael?
Great, I'm next. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Michael Echave. I'm an AEC technical specialist here at ATG. And like Danny was talking about what we all offer, but my primary background is in structural design. Before I started out, I did a little bit of architectural, and then I figured out that wasn't my game. And then to custom windows and doors, so more mechanical design, and then scooped up into structural design. I fell in love with the software Revit, and learning the ins and outs, and then got picked up by ATG for consulting for primarily structural design, with as long as architectural as well. And what we do here as AEC technical specialists are kind of doing analysis on different items that clients need help with, such as training for the software, not specifically Revit. I'm also a Bluebeam certified instructor, as well as an Autodesk certified instructor, and soon to be implementation of Panzura infrastructure as well. So that's just kind of tools in our tool belt that we have of techs on staff, that what we can do.
Okay, great. So looking back, I mean, 2020 has been this crazy year, right? We're still kind of in the middle of a lot of this, but it's been kind of a crazy year. And so I just wanted to ask you guys, like, the beginning of the year, we started to hear about COVID. So February, it started to get serious. You know, some of my clients came to me in February and said, hey, what happens when our China office shuts down? And what are we going to do? And it seemed like, God, it was just a very short period of time. And all of a sudden, people weren't just talking about China offices shutting down. It was all of a sudden, hey, we could be shutting down here in the US real quick. So why don't you just describe like what you guys saw, you know, in what you were going through in that period? Some of your customers.
I'll start and Michael chime in, but I think overall, I think we've seen a lot of companies, really kind of rush to review different types of solutions to try and stay productive, and I think Greg, the title of this is when COVID hit the AEC industry, it was really divided into two groups. And that first group, people were sent home and they logged in and got, right back to work. And then there's that second group where they couldn't access the files. They had all sorts of workflow issues. And we kind of, we saw that here at ATG. And, I think, even at ATG, we were almost through this transition. And really at the 1st of March, we just accelerated that process and moved to that entire remote environment. And so I think it really, and Greg, I think maybe you mentioned it in one of our pre-planning calls, is really just accelerated this process into this remote workforce environment. So I think that's what happened to a lot of companies.
Yeah, I think, the industry was kind of moving towards, certainly we started hosting data up in the cloud. We started to get a lot of AEC customers, as I mentioned. I've been at this for 6 years selling it to AEC customers, right? So they were kind of moving to the cloud, but putting their data up there. And some of our customers were seeing, hey, if I could get small units, small offices, things like that, to not have so much infrastructure, maybe I could have them work in the cloud too. And some of them were moving that way, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and just whoosh, everybody's working from home, right? And so now, so what do you think that, in your experience, that the customers you had that did well, made that move easy? What was the key to making that move easy? And then for the customers who maybe were struggling with that, what are the things they're struggling with when they're trying to make that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that off as well, Danny, if you would like me to.
Sure.
Clients primarily struggling first was the hardware, right? So how do we transfer people with desktops to their homework environment, right? Everything's stored locally on their desktop. Do we get in their desktop because, hey, maybe we're coming back next week, or maybe we're closing out, right? And then where are those files being stored on those desktops? Are they stored locally on-prem? Or are they stored in the cloud, all of the information, so they can work seamlessly wherever they go? Or are they having laptops? And everyone saw the shortage of us having hardware going out, right? People were back ordered. I mean, not us so much as us for BIMbox reselling, but other manufacturer were definitely having some hold up for infrastructure replacements. And then file access, right? How do we get file access that's seamless? If Joe's working somewhere else, is he going to see the same file that I just updated? Is it going to lock if Joe opens that file? What about the speeds, right? People had bandwidth issues. A lot of clients can't control what their end users are being provided with for bandwidth, right? So how can they access those files easily and readily? Because did it take them an hour to download? So they just drank coffee and sat on their couch while it downloaded a file? Who knows, right? But that's a lost hour of pay that you just paid your employee to do nothing, essentially, except watch what I like to call the spinning wheel of death. So
Right. And so so some people were struggling with access to their data, and the companies that it went really smooth for, what did we see there?
Smooth transitions were people that already had infrastructures in place, cloud solutions, right? They didn't have to worry about their data, and maybe they didn't have the hardware capabilities yet, but they were able to establish the hardware capabilities which were easily accessed to their cloud data, right? So storage that was already in place, such as Panzura, or having a VDI system in place where they're accessing it from a cheaper laptop. They don't have to worry about buying a more efficient laptop. They're just logging into their VDI system, having a cloud solution storage. So Joe that's working in Paris can have the same type of file that he opens up, it's locking, and Joe and then Michael over in Texas can have the same file, right?
Right.
So those companies that had implementations in place, they were good to go. Other ones were lagging behind and trying to figure out solutions. And like you were saying, Greg, everyone was rushing to the table. What do we do?
Yeah, there's this huge rush, right, to get those resources all of a sudden, right? To try and find resources, do VDI. Some offices were set up to have employees VDI into the office, and that worked well too. But one of my other customers was mentioning that all of a sudden people had the freedom to just not have to come in the office. So if I have to work from home or if I have to work from a cabin in Tahoe, who really cares, right? but that person physically moving away meant now he's a lot further away from the office and things may not work quite so well or seamlessly. And so some of our customers found, I mean, you put VDI up in the cloud and you have a Panzura up in the cloud in various different regions, you end up with people, didn't really matter where they went as long as they hit the right cloud region or the resource that's running local to them, and they had a much better experience. So those people who were set up with that were a little bit ahead of their game, but I mean, I can't say nobody anticipated COVID, but they're kind of headed in that direction anyway. I mean, I've told you guys, I think the industry is going towards those resources all running up in the cloud, VDI running in the cloud, Panzura is running in the cloud, different regions. Panzura takes care of the problem that you're running in different regions and where your data is going, it's all going into the Panzura in that cloud. But COVID really pushed a lot of people in that direction. Now, not everybody's really, you know, set up for that. I mean, if you're a 100-person firm and all of a sudden everybody has to work from home and VDI in, and that VDI machine might cost $3,000 a year, that's $300,000 in your budget you weren't ready for this year, right? And that's just not possible. So a lot of people sent their employees home with their desktop or their laptop, or have them VDI into the office to do their work, which is a perfectly good solution. But I do think that the industry, every time you see more people going towards leaning towards a solution, I think more and more you're going to see people heading to VDI running in the cloud. You can pool resources up there. You can make them as big as you want, small as you want, you know, and without having to buy a new machine, you know, and live with that machine for years, you know. I do think that's where people are headed. But in the meantime, we also have to support people who are running from their desktop, right? So,
And in that hybrid environment, right, Greg? Either working from home and then going back to the office and then closure again, going back home, right?
Right. And so now we're looking at, if some of these people were allowed to go back into the office, things are looking so good right now, it might be being sent home again. And you got to have a lot of flexibility. I think the key is having the flexibility to be able to do that. But so the customers maybe that weren't quite set up for this and asked to get set up for it, what do they need to get set up to do that, do you think? What do they need to get that going?
Before we jump there, I do want to kind of just jump on what you said earlier. I mean, that is exactly what we're seeing from companies out there in this, you know, hybrid approach where a portion of their assets, you know, are on the cloud, and then the other part is you know, on-prem. And so I think that's where, you know, the Panzura and ATG kind of partnership can really help approach that from an enterprise standpoint to help you manage all that data. And so, you know, we're here at AU, we talk a lot about project data, And I think that's where like a BIM 360 comes into play. But I think where Panzura can really help companies with is being able to manage all of their data, not just that project data, but everything associated with that project. And so I think you're spot on. I mean, that's what we see a lot at ATG, is this kind of this hybrid approach. So and Michael talks to a lot of them, so Michael's got a better feel than I do. I certainly see that.
Yeah, it's. Oh, Greg, you go. Sorry.
well, BIM 360 is well set up to build a project, right? You invite people, you can have multiple different companies working on that project, and then we're the solution for all of your enterprise data. So, you know, anybody working up there in BIM 360 should be backing up their own data, right? You don't want to be responsible. You don't want the person that's hosting that project in BIM 360 responsible for your data. You don't want Autodesk responsible for your data, so you should be backing up your data. And so that's where we come in. You bring it back down onto the Panzura on whatever increment you want, daily, weekly, whatever, but you have that, your data is your responsibility. But also all the stuff that's not a project, you know, it's just office data. It's your accounting, your marketing, and everything else just goes on Panzura. You own that data, it's your bucket. Panzura doesn't manage that. We manage the data for you from our devices, but we don't own anything of your data. You own it all. So that's really where Panzura and BIM 360 make a good mesh, right? They deal with the project. They have a lot of workflow, a lot of project management tools. But when the project is all said and done, you often have to keep that data for 7 years, right? So we can house that data very cheaply and inexpensively for you. And do other things as well. So what were you going to say, Michael?
Pretty much cover where I was kind of heading as well. And in terms of what end users want to know is probably what kind of information is being processed to Panzura, right? Why is it more efficient to pull data down from Panzura than any other cloud storage system?
Right, because we cache the data locally. So what you're working on a day-to-day basis is right there on that Panzura. So when you work on, say, an AutoCAD drawing, a Civil 3D drawing, something like that, during the day, you close that drawing, you go home for the day. Chances are 8 in the morning, the next morning, you're gonna open that same file, right? That file is still, although every time you save it, we push the data up to the cloud, what you saved is still there on your server. So when you come in the next morning, you open that file, it comes right off of that server that's sitting right there in your office. If you're working on VDI in the cloud, it's sitting on a Panzura that's right next to that VDI machine. And so it's right there ready to access. There's no delay in downloading it, finding the latest version, things like that. And we're also very efficient at caching things you've worked on. So if you work on it today, maybe overnight, somebody in a different time zone, something works on that, we know that this is a file you worked on recently. So any changes that are made other places get downloaded back down to your machine. So again, you come in the morning, that file is ready to go for that project. All of that project data is ready to go right there on that filer for you. So it's very fast and efficient. And so, yeah, it's a great solution from that standpoint of working locally. But you know, when you saw this kind of transition to COVID, and customers now all your users are working as companies' users are working from home. What was the feedback you got from customers about? Was that working? Not working? I mean, how did they feel about? You know, a lot of the resistance was, I can't have people working from home. That's like taking a vacation day, right? Do you think, did people come back and say, hey, my whole company's now on vacation, or what?
No, I think, I can speak to it from a sales aspect. I think, when it hit, I think what it did is just really accelerated this push to this remote environment. And we came up with some different solutions to help customers, but there was just kind of I wanted to say there's rush to uncover what are all the different options out there to go to this more pure remote environment. And I think that's something that certainly here at ATG we can help you with, along with the Panzura solution, to be able to go and look at how you're set up and how we can maximize your efficiency. So I don't know, Michael, anything from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, and one of the questions I think Greg was asking, how is efficient are employees working from home too, right? Greg, are they actually working when they're from home? And yeah, right. And who knows? Well, now you know, because this project's getting finished or not now, right?
Right.
And that's something that ATG actually embraced before COVID, post-COVID, or before pre-COVID, I guess you would say. We had employees working remotely, right? So we understood what it took for employees to work remotely and how they could be efficient, time management. And then you need to lace that also with the software, right? What applications can they work on? How do we give them data quickly when we can't control their bandwidth, right? Maybe their provider only has 60 meg download. How are they going to be able to access that data readily? And that's something we can provide as well, is doing an analysis. Hey, what is the best solution for you when you're talking to us about your pain points, right? So what I've seen from the industry, at least from our specific industry, AEC, would be an actual uptick in production, right? They're not having their colleague come over here say, hey, can you come look at this? No, they're more efficient because they're working on their tasks at hand. So from at least our point of view, from what I've noticed from the industry, I think production has been an uptick if they have the processing speed to pull the data down, right?
Right. If they have that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but they're also, I mean, I know my commute is 45 minutes on a good day. On bad days it can be more than an hour, right? And to and from, and especially if you're in an area where weather conditions are bad, right? Things just get even worse, right? And so now they're not that what the time they would have spent just traveling, not doing anything but listening to the radio, right? Now they can spend that time working as well. And it's not, some do, some don't, but there's just a certain amount of, there's kind of a work-life balance there you got to draw. But I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out. But it gives them that flexibility, right? Especially if their kids aren't in school right now. Ooh, they got to have that ability to.
And I think this solution, we've proven that people can work, remotely and be really effective, right? And to your point, Greg, about going in the office or traveling, you take all of that out. I think people are more productive today than they were, say, 8-9 months ago. But to your point earlier, is there's probably been a little bit of a dip from a work-life balance standpoint, I'm sure we all feel like we're working a whole lot more with no kind of clear separation. But I think we've proven that people can be much more effective and productive in these type of remote situations.
And I think it proved out that they could be more effective than a lot of upper management and companies thought they would be, right? They were all resisting this kind of move to, hey, we're gonna have everybody work from home, and then we can hire.
They're gonna be productive. We're scared. They're not
right.
Anything when they get to work.
How am I gonna know who's working and who's not and things, and is anything gonna get done? And I think they just found that, hey, this actually can work. People can be responsible.
Right.
It can be obvious, who's working, who's not. So going forward, what do you guys think is going to be like, when they can go back to the office? Are they? What are you guys hearing?
Yeah, I think you're going to see this. I think I think the future is going to be more of this hybrid approach, and excuse me, a little less of that office environment would be with it's kind of some of the things I've heard. I don't know, Michael, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, I think the work-life balance has made employees a lot happier, which makes them more productive, right? So the end result, if companies are seeing that their employees are being more productive, they'll probably want to keep them in a hybrid environment, right? Hey, maybe come to the office for meetings, or just keep a whole remote employee system going.
Right. And I think some of them are kind of tentative about going back, right? It's like, okay, they're gonna let me go back, but do I really want to go back into it? Especially if they're not the only tenants in a building, right? So our company's being responsible, but the 300 people in this building, and who knows who's being responsible or not, and has the mechanical systems been upgraded and all those things. So I think a lot of that is going to be interesting to see how it goes. No, nobody's going to be able to predict well exactly how it's going to go, but a lot of our customers are saying, you know, we may only get back to 50% capacity of what we were at, and that's a rotating 50%, right? So it's like sometimes it's this group, sometimes it's that group, and you got to be flexible. And so you got to have that. I think the smart people are the people who are saying, or who aren't sitting here going, hey, I think I'm going to try and wait this out and see if I can get through this, right? And I think the smart ones are thinking, hey, I need to start planning for, you know, this being a long-term thing, right?
Right.
Embracing it. It's definitely hard for our industry to embrace new technology, especially such as VDI solution. And that's kind of where you're paired in, Greg, as well, for their mobile app, right? So if they're still waiting to take the plunge, they want to get their toes wet, they can try at least the mobile portion of Panzura, allowing them to kind of work still in this hybrid environment. And then when they're ready to do maybe VDI solution, they can kind of go full off the edge into the deep end with it.
Yeah, and so our mobile solution was really initially built as something to give you mobile access to your data, right? Just that. And so it's meant to allow you to take your cell phone, an iPad, something like that. Maybe you're traveling on your way home on the train, just need to look at a document, or you're out in the field and you're doing some field work, some site visit or something, and you forgot a document that's not on your laptop or something, and you just need to be able to get to it. That's really where we had so many people coming to us saying, I need access to stuff on my Panzura, and it can't be in another silo, some sharing silo, something where I have to move the data there, because then if I forget to put this file there, or I've got to copy, you know, the whole project up to that so that I can get to it from my phone while I'm out on the job site. That's a lot of data to move around. So we were getting a ton of requests for that. And so, but what it showed us at the beginning of this year was all of a sudden the people that have it and want to look at it suddenly are like, I don't want to just use it out in the field. Now I want my employees to start using it in their office. And I had to stop and say, wasn't what we were planning it for, right? But there are some things we're going to be doing to help implement that as well. I think early next year you're going to start seeing some more releases around mobile that allow you to do things like lock a file. So even when you're working remotely, if your workflow will support it, you don't have to be in that collaborative, I've got the file locked just like I was sitting at my desktop. You can say more like, hey, I can download this file, I can lock it, I can work on it, and then I can push it back up and unlock it when I'm done. If that flow is going to work for you, I think you're going to find us doing that, because we're adapting to this scenario as well, right? We're trying to provide an environment that works for people, knowing that even when things go back to normal, there is no more normal, right? What used to be normal probably isn't going to be normal. So we're going to provide solutions that kind of tailor to that allow that to happen as well.
So will that be kind of like a book, Greg? You check it out. Joe can't go check it out, so I check it back in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, something like that. Exactly. That's a good analogy. And so, you know, while you're working on it, you've got it locked. Hopefully you're online so people can like say, hey, you've got this file locked, can you give it up now? You know, and maybe you didn't think about it, but yeah, the details of exactly how that works, I can't explain yet. We're still working on that development. As soon as I can demo that for people, I will. But that's something I think you can expect in the near future.
Right.
So when people are setting up these environments, Michael, so let's say they want to put, they have to have data up in the cloud and they want to do VDI in the cloud. What do they typically, somebody who doesn't have a cloud presence yet, what do they have to do? What do they have to think about when they go to make that move?
So first, how are we going to move all of our data, right? Transition our data from either on-prem to a cloud solution, right? Or file structure. How are they going to see the documents when they're looking for them, right? How is it going to be presented to them when I'm going and looking through my file explorer, which we're all used to? Can our teammates going to see the same thing that I see? Those are kind of the things and questions clients are asking because they haven't experienced a cloud environment, right? And that's something that's great about Panzura when we're setting up the infrastructure for it. You can make it mimic the same file structure you've had before, such as going to your C drive, looking for documents under, let's say, a architectural folder that you had would be the same one that someone else would see over in the Texas office or something like that, right? So the transition can be seamless. It takes a little while, of course, to implement in terms of getting our files up to there, deciding how we're going to process our data, and how many sites we're having. It really depends as well, right? So that all comes into play, but they can expect it to look and mimic almost to what they already have.
Yeah, and when you go out in the cloud, you got to think about things like security, right? You also have to, and that's probably something you guys can help people with, right? You don't, customers don't have to think, people that want to make this move don't have to think about doing it alone. They can find people like you guys to help them create that environment up in the cloud, make it, give them same kind of access, domain control things in their cloud environment that also, it's just like another office, right?
Correct, yeah. And they can set up a backup, right? They can have two cloud solutions where they're having a second backup that's taking a set amount of snapshots of their content, however much they want. Security, I'm leaning more towards you, Greg. I'm talking more of the high end. What kind of security do they have for encryption, right? I would ask and relay to you, but we do and can set up the infrastructure environment of whatever cloud solution, as AWS or Azure, right? Type of information, and the type of cloud storage you're going to have would be bytes of storage that we're going to have for it. Sorry, what kind of storage again, Greg? Sorry, is it
Block storage?
Block storage, that's what it is, not bytes. I'm thinking bytes equals right. In terms
Yeah,
of information,
we
but
break
yeah,
everything
block
down.
storage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so right, so but I mean, the point being, when people are thinking about making this transition, and you stop and say, I don't know anything about the cloud, really you don't have to. You don't, especially if you're smaller offices, you really don't have to. You work with somebody like ATG, they help you set up that environment. Once it's set up, there's not a whole lot more you have to do in the way of maintenance, unless you're a bigger firm. You get into the bigger firms, yeah, you have to do a bit more, but you usually have people on staff that learn that and learn to do it. But yeah, Panzura's security is top notch. If you're worried about your security at all, as I mentioned, AEC is just one of the markets we go into. We also work with places that require really high security, government agencies, banking agencies, law firms, things like that. So our security is what we call FIPS 140-2 certified. It's a fancy way of saying this is a government specified level of security. We go through the testing, we pay them a huge check to test and verify that our security is as secure as it is, so that we can get government contracts. And so that same level of security goes into your documents, and it gets broken down, and everything that goes up in the cloud gets broken into small blocks, compressed, deduped, and encrypted. So if anybody broke into your vault up there in AWS, Azure, Google, and got all your data, it would just look like garbage. Unless you had the keys to put all those pieces back together again, it would just look like garbage. So so really, you don't have to be worried about security from that standpoint. And you work with somebody like ATG to set up a secure environment up there in the cloud. And once it's up and running, it's pretty smooth.
And even learning the interface, if you wanted to learn snapshots, it's very easygoing in terms of how the dashboard interface looks, and learning how it would actually be processed, changing some of the items for it.
Yep. And then, as far as security goes, there are other parts of security, though, that you really worry about. Now you've got hundreds of people working from home, right? What are you seeing? What kind of security issues do you have when people now are out of the office?
So you don't have a lot of control of whatever they're using in terms of looking up stuff on the internet or downloading content unless you have their administrative locks. So you're worried about what is my end user going to download onto this desktop, and is that going to then do some kind of malware against my items, right? And if it did happen, how could I access my documents from a later point to restore them? Is that even possible? Right? Those are some of the questions you would see, usually what I see from clients.
Right, and so Panzura snapshotting is so nice for that because it takes snapshots at a schedule that you can set up yourself, but basically it's usually hourly for several days, daily for several weeks, right? So at some point, some crypto virus comes in and starts encrypting all your data. Those snapshots cannot be overwritten. So what we call immutable. And it means that once that snapshot's written, never gets overwritten. That's how we keep the history of every version of a file that's saved, is through those snapshots. So we can't overwrite those because we can't overwrite them when something comes in and crypto virus comes in and attacks and starts encrypting your data. It can't encrypt what's already been written. So it can only encrypt what the user saves right now. So you find out when that hit and go back to a snapshot prior to that and restore a bunch of data. And our support team has helped a lot of people recover from crypto virus. They're very skilled at figuring out, hey, when did it occur? Which files are encrypted? And we'll restore all those files for you. It's something, it's one of the biggest advantages. But also, you know, for smaller offices, a lot of times the physical security if you only have, I was talking to another customer this morning, he only has one office, and that doesn't usually lend itself to what people think of Panzura for, because we collaborate. But with one office, you're really worried that a hurricane comes and takes out that office. All your data sitting right there in that office, right? And so, you know, whereas a company with 4 or 5 offices, they have the ability to just copy the data between the offices, kind of gives them offsite backup just by keeping things in sync. Panzura, because it's writing all that data up to the cloud, that office could get leveled, and you would just need to set up a new Panzura, log in, and bring the data you're working on down to that device. So we provide a lot of different types of security to really make to make everything robust.
And more seamless, right?
Yeah, make everything a little smoother when it comes to any type of kind of secure environment, right? It gets rid of the need for a lot of our customers just eliminate tape backup completely.
And sleep at night.
Yeah, and they sleep, right? You don't have to worry about malware. You don't have to worry about the weather. You know, one of our customers got a call like 5:30 in the morning. He says, how secure, how confident are you in your backup systems? And he's like, why? And they said, because our Boston office is burning to the ground. And, you know, I mean, just leveled, that whole building went down. And he said, well, I have no problem about our data. He said, it took me longer to find a new office for all those people to where it moved to than it did to the Panzura. Was just a matter of ordering new hardware and just having it sync. Within a day, he had the Panzura ready to go, but he had to find a new office for all these people. Different scenario now. Now you just send them all home, and they're working like they do now.
Yeah. And they're good to go, right? Because they have the infrastructure already set up, and there's no worry there.
Right.
One question would be, how does Panzura work with Revit files or Civil 3D? What type of file types can Panzura work with?
Yeah, we can work with almost all your CAD applications. So even Revit, you got multiple people in the same file at the same time. We can handle that pretty much anywhere on a continent. No matter what continent you're on, your latency has the one place that latency can have an impact on Panzura is when you have multiple people in the same file at the same time. Then that syncing, that data has to stay in sync while people are touching the same file, right? So I have to do that basically across the continent. you're fine. Other types of data, we handle all the big applications, civil 3D. If you're a structural engineer, you use Tekla. It's similar to Revit, multiple people in the same file at the same time. We have several customers using Tekla at multiple different sites. Geopack, there are many different applications out there, but that's one of the beauties of us. We don't write anything specifically for an application. We just look at the behavior of all the applications out there, and we look at supporting that behavior. So Revit is just one more behavior that we have to look at supporting. But yeah, Civil 3D, even Rhino and all of your modeling software that gets a little more advanced, all of those work quite well on us. We have many customers using those all day long. And so the only one that is a little bit tough is ArcGIS. That one, that's a tough nut to crack, let me tell you. They have a long history of why they do things and how they do it. I don't claim to understand any of that, but the reality is we can still support ArcGIS. We can do it just about as good as any other solution, but it has to be people working locally off of their filer. You can't do it in multiple locations at multiple times. It's one of the few applications. In fact, it's the only application I know of where we throw up an exception and say, I can't support working on this simultaneously across multiple different sites.
But they could work on it locally on the one site wherever the file is going to be at.
And you can have multiple people in the file as long as they're all on the same site.
Okay.
Working off of the same server, basically. This is what the key there. But you still gain all the benefits of we're taking snapshots of that data, we're pushing it up to the cloud, it's safe, it's secure, it can be accessed in other locations, just not at the same time. So, but yeah, it's a good question.
And then for file locking for those, is it application based? Do you have your own file locking structure for Panzura?
Yeah, no, so what Panzura does, an application opens a file and locks it. If the application locks the file, it's locked on us. The only thing we do is take that same system and make all of your access points, all of your filers that are Panzura filers aware of that lock that's occurring at that site. So when you open it and you lock that file, everybody else is locked out of it until you close that file and it unlocks, and then somebody else at a different site can open it. It's just like working in one office, except you have multiple offices, and that's really the area we excel at, is making a global environment work like it's just like a local area network as far as locking and things like that go.
Okay, so whatever the application SMB locking is, it's going to maintain that same locking style, and it's going to mimic it everywhere else, essentially. Okay.
And here's a great call we get probably every 6 months, and probably even a little more often than that, but usually it's with new customers, and they just don't realize Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, and maybe one of their other applications. I don't know why, but they just choose not to lock the file. So we don't lock it either because the application doesn't want to lock the file. But I bet you most of the experience is because they're often just working off of this on their local drive, right? And so Adobe Illustrator just doesn't think for whatever reason over all the years has never really implemented a file lock. And they put it on the Panzura and they start working on it, and then they always come to our support and say, this file, I can have two people in the same file at the same time and it just overwrites each other. And we say, yeah, that's because that's what the application does. So we do whatever the application does.
Right. So you're not creating your own file locking system. It's specific to that application, just like with Revit, it's bytes of whatever is in the elements that are being file locked if you're working collaboratively or anything like that, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. And then, let's see.
So we have a question of how BIM 360 works with Panzura. So as we discussed earlier, BIM 360 is a great tool for creating a project, hosting a project up there. But when you work with BIM 360, you're going to put your data up there where that is. There isn't a whole lot of ability to say have it on in BIM 360 and on a Panzura, not yet. There are things we're looking into and we're collaborating with BIM 360 on there in order to try and do that. But right now, if your data is up in BIM 360, it's up there and that's how you're going to access it. And it's important that, you know, that's a project and we discussed kind of that's the workflow you have to support. It's a great solution for that workflow. But you should be backing up your data on the Panzura. So keep that in mind whenever you're using BIM 360. But we're the source for all of your data company-wide, and BIM 360 is really about building a project and creating a project up there, especially when it comes to multiple companies working on that project. They're a great solution that's been pretty much specifically built for that scenario.
More so to collaborate with outside consultants, right? Sharing links,
Right.
working simultaneously with outside consultants, whereas Panzura is more of our at-home infrastructure, right?
Yeah, and it's all your data, right? It's everything, but it's your data. Also, usually a lot of companies, it's a contract requirement, right? That everybody has to put their data in one location. Often when building owners have a lot of control over how it gets designed and built and everything else, they'll say, we want all the data in one location. I don't want to find out that my MEP consultant has worked for the last year and I've already paid him for a bunch of this, just lost all the data, right? I want to have a little more control over that. So sometimes it's a contract requirement as well.
Another question came in. They have Panzura currently, it looks like, on AWS. Can we point our snapshots to save in Azure?
So we have a new technology coming out that is called cloud mirroring. And it will allow you to save your primary set of data in AWS and also pick a mirrored site, which could be a completely different provider. It could be AWS as well as just a different region in AWS if you're worried about one region getting knocked out or for some reason, but often it could be a whole separate provider that you could have some of it, you know, your primary access in AWS, but if AWS, that location went down for any reason, it would automatically flip over to Azure. And that's something new in our 8.0 release that's just coming out. And so yes, you can have all of your snapshots and things go into two different locations, a primary and a secondary, and we'll if the primary goes down, we'll automatically flip over and start reading and writing data from the secondary until the primary comes back up. Mm-hmm. It's called cloud mirroring, and it's a really good new technology we're bringing about, which also a lot of the feedback we've gotten in the past is that people are a little concerned about having all their data in one bucket in one service provider. No matter how big they are, if anything happens to that bucket, it goes. So cloud mirroring gives you that second redundant place where all your data is.
And then when you do the mirroring, if site A goes down, right, it still looks the same with your file structure as the other one was there before.
It actually does an automatic flip. You shouldn't even know that your site, your IT guys will know, hey, the primary site's down, they'll get notification for whatever reason, but the Panzura will automatically flip to the secondary site and read and write and access data there, so you're not down at all.
And then the second site comes back up eventually. That is where your next storage would be.
Yeah, so then we bring them back up into sync because while it was down, it kind of fell out of sync. You've been pushing more and more data into the secondary. We bring the primary back up to where it's level, and then we start reading and writing data from that. You can also do things like use cheaper storage on the secondary, because usually where you get hit for storage is when you're reading it out. You can use a slightly, I forget their term, I think Azure calls it hot and cold. AWS calls it S3 and infrequent access. But those infrequent access or cold storage, that's a cheaper storage, but you're going to pay more when you access the data. But since you're only accessing it when one of them is down anyway, it's really cheap storage. It's a really good option for a second very cheap storage, but it's redundant. It's just another way of providing really good security behind your data.
Doesn't look like we had any more follow-ups for that one.
Yeah.
That was a great question though, because that's always a question is what if a site goes down? How do we back up our data? Do we have to wait till we get a whole new Panzura implemented in? But you could easily have a solution in store if we go dark. We have another one that's going to step right in and provide us with a solution, right?
And honestly, in 6 years, I know of 2 significant outages. One was in AWS and one was Azure. And I think they were both for about 4 to 6 hours. But if you're a large company and your whole company is on the blink because of that, now Panzura will allow you to read and write a certain amount of data while they're down, even if your cloud is down. But if you're doing collaboration across sites and things, we really need that cloud to be up. If your primary cloud goes down and it's down, we'll let you usually work for 20, 30 minutes, being able to save data, read what's on the controller. That kind of activity does okay. But then after a while, all the data you're writing starts to backlog up and the Panzura starts to say, hey, I need to offload some of this data here. I'm going to be in trouble. And so, after a while, you can only work for a certain amount of time. And so, if your company is down for 6 hours, imagine the billable time you have for 100 people, $100 an hour. 6 hours starts to add up to a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take long. Yeah. So, so something significant happens, you just don't want to be in that position. So cloud mirroring gives you that alternative to where if you're smart, you make them completely different regions of the country or different countries. You make sure that they're different providers, and then you have all of your bases kind of covered. Okay, well, we were shooting for this. I don't see any more questions. Oh, we did want to ask a poll question. Jessica, did you want to put that up just for our own purposes? We did want to know what your current solutions are for going into how you access data during COVID. And how you're getting to it. VDIing into a machine in the office? Are you VDIing, are you basically running a client instance up in the cloud? Do you just map a drive to a server in the office? Or do you have some other way? It'd be interesting to see how our customers are figuring this out, solving these problems.
Now you do still have the ability, right, as we kind of have these rolling in, Greg, to still have Panzura on-prem and still be able to VPN and get some speed increase, correct?
Yeah, because depending on where you're VPNing from, I mean, all your data is up in the cloud, it's in one location in the cloud, and that might be a region on the East Coast, might be a region on the West Coast, Central, something like that. But if you're working from home, but you have an office right there next to you, again, we're caching that data on the Panzura there in the office. So VPNing into the office is going to give you probably much less latency, much better speed at accessing the data than it would to trying to go to one location for data across the whole country or around the world, right? So there are a lot of advantages there to just having that data there. So yeah, a third of them VDI to a machine in the office, and 60% do some other. Nobody VPNs in and maps the drive
Wow.
in the office. That's interesting.
I wonder what that other is, right?
Yeah.
For those of us that put other, if you would be able to chat so we can also talk about that other solution.
Right. So VDI into machine in the office is fairly straightforward, right? A lot of people have that ability. I mean, if it's just a machine running on your desktop in the office, you just remote desktop into it, right? And you have the ability. So I'm not surprised that's a fairly popular solution. I am curious
So
what
one
some of the...
person said they did all three. That's why they answered other.
Okay.
Yeah. Another one said we have 10% of our organization working off the cloud VDI. Another one's my users are VPNing into Azure to a Panzura filer.
Yeah, so you have some resources here that we could talk about anything you guys want us to talk about. So I mean, we only have a couple minutes left, but if you guys have other questions for us, anything that's even a little bit off topic, we're happy to answer any of those questions for you. Yeah, I will say that I think where the industry is going to be running a VDI up in the cloud, mapped to something like a Panzura that kind of keeps all of your data in sync across all the different regions. So you have the best experience of VDI along with the best experience of having all your data in one location. I really think that's where they're going, but I totally understand that may not be achievable for everybody. It's not like everybody can walk out and do that tomorrow. You know, those are things that are going to have to slowly work into people's budget. But even the amount of people we see going to that, we see more and more solutions. WorkSpot would be one solution where they provide a desktop running in the cloud. They allow you to spin them up as you need them, shut them down when you don't need them. Frame was another solution that does that. But we're starting to see even more, and the more kind of approaches I see to this coming up, Microsoft has some great technology for building one big server and allowing multiple people to access and create virtual instances off of that server, and they can provide that at a much cheaper rate. So as soon as you get beyond about 10, 15 people, that becomes very cost effective. And every time I see a new solution come up, it's a little bit cheaper than the last solution, right? Otherwise, why would you do it? So every time, well, yeah, I mean, if you can't beat the competition right now, what's the use of coming out with a product? So every time one of these solutions comes out, it gets a little bit cheaper. And I really think pretty soon, almost everybody's going to find it's cheaper to run that machine up in the cloud than it is to buy that old infrastructure desktop kind of hardware that is so expensive, and you have to worry about keeping it busy, is paying for itself over the years. I think the flexibility the cloud is going to provide is really where things are going.
And I see our industry definitely making hesitation, right, about what is VDI. Is it even capable of handling 15, 20 users utilizing Revit, let's say, right, a heavy application for processing speeds? Can VDI solutions actually handle it, right, Greg?
Yeah, and that's experimentation, right? Everybody uses all these different applications to different levels, right? Some people build huge models and really stress those heavy duty machines. Other people might be able to run Revit on their laptop, right? But nonetheless, I have seen massive VDI implementations fail, right? They thought, oh, this is going to be the best thing that's ever come. Before they even, before Panzura was even around, they thought just VDI was going to be it. I'll create these VDI farms, I can spin these up. And the user experience on that was really bad. So you might have a lot of people that have a lot of hesitation to say, hey, I'm going to run VDI in the cloud, because they're going to say, we've tried this before, it was terrible. The solutions coming around now are a little bit different. And also, it's very important to keep that VDI instance really close to you. So that's usually where you're going to have the best success, is if you can make it so that VDI is really close to you, then you have that the best of both worlds. You have the VDI instance running in the cloud, the Panzura running in the cloud, working on all that same data.
Right. So the immediate hesitation was first when VDI was around for the AEC, it wasn't too the processing speeds we needed, right?
Yeah.
And now, as evolution happens, right, just like hard drives to solid state drives, we're having better comparable GPUs and CPUs that can handle the applications running simultaneously with multiple people in there.
And that was a big hurdle when I first started Panzura. Running a GPU in the cloud was very hard to get machine instances and things that had GPUs that you could spin up easily and shut down easily. Now a lot of these solutions are just like, how much do you want? How much do you want? How much GPU do you want? We can slice and dice this any way you want it. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what your users need, right? And to run effectively. And that's the beauty of it. If you buy some big piece of hardware and it sits in the office and you thought, oh, that's just gonna serve up 5 of my users, and then you find out, well, this really only works for 2. I now have this big, huge hunk of metal sitting in my office that I paid a bunch of money for, and maybe it isn't working as much as I thought it would. You try something in the cloud, you say, didn't like that, throw it away, right? You rarely have, you can try it, work with it for a while. Making a long-term commitment to it often makes it a little bit cheaper, like, hey, I'm gonna lease this for a year, but you're able to test it out, really put it through its paces for a long time before you kind of make that commitment. I think all those things are gonna make cloud, VDI instances running in the cloud very much what people want to see.
Making that
Hey,
transition
Greg,
a little bit easier.
thank you for this time today and letting us be a part of this. This is Panzura is a big part of ATG's portfolio, and we just certainly appreciate the opportunity to get on and have the opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah, and we really appreciate having you guys as a partner. All of our partners always help us out. So again, when you're looking at going to this, look at a partner because they can help you set things up. Anything that you're uncomfortable with, or just the storage aspect of things, data management aspect of things, but they can handle a lot of those other things for you as well. We are at the top of the hour. So I think we're gonna start wrapping it up. And if you guys have further questions, always feel free to email any one of us. Email ATG, especially if they can't answer your Panzura question, they can always get me involved. And we really appreciate all of your time here today.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you guys.